On a vibrant Friday morning, Ibrahim Traoré strode through the ornate halls of the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, his steps echoing with purpose. At 37, the young president bore the immense responsibility of guiding a nation in the midst of transformation, while also serving as a bold representative of Africa on the global stage. The arid breeze of the Sahel filled the air, but inside the palace, a different kind of tension simmered. Traoré had spent the early hours riveted by international news, his heart heavy with reports of Israel's latest military strikes against targets in Iran. The images of devastation, streaming in real time, stirred a deep anger within him, each civilian casualty fueling his resolve. Mr. President, his communications advisor, Kofi Mensah, said, glancing at his watch, which read 9:30 a.m., the international press is clamoring for an official statement on the Middle East crisis. Social media is buzzing with speculation about our stance, and the attacks are still unfolding live. Traoré paused by a large window overlooking the bustling streets of Ouagadougou. Women in vibrant fabrics balanced baskets on their heads. Children darted between ancient baobab trees, and vendors arranged their wares in the lively Friday market. It was the heartbeat of his people, a stark contrast to the chaos dominating global news. Prepare the press room for 11:00, he said, his voice calm but resolute. It's time to speak truths while the wounds are still fresh. As he made his way to the room, where history would soon be written, Traoré carefully considered his words. He knew his speech would ripple far beyond Burkina Faso's borders, reaching the ears of leaders in Tel Aviv, Washington, Paris, and every capital where the fates of war and peace were decided. These were men often insulated from the raw pain of human suffering, and Traoré intended to pierce that shield. The press room filled rapidly, a mix of local reporters and international correspondents, their anticipation palpable. At exactly 11 o'clock, Traoré entered, his posture commanding yet approachable, dressed in a simple, impeccably tailored suit that mirrored his leadership style, dignified yet revolutionary. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, he began at 11:05, his voice slicing through the silence with precision. Today, I speak not as the president of Burkina Faso alone, but as a citizen of a world desperate for justice and humanity. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the intensity in his eyes. From his youth, Traoré had understood the power of words to either unite or divide, and now he wielded them with purpose. In the past few hours, we have witnessed calculated and inhumane acts of aggression in the Middle East. As I stand here, the echoes of these attacks still reverberate, leaving destruction in their wake. We see leaders who mistake might for right, who believe violence can birth peace. He paused, letting the gravity of his words settle. Peace is not forged this way, he declared, the 6 words resonating like a clarion call, carrying the moral weight of a continent. Meanwhile, across the globe in Tel Aviv, it was 12:05 p.m., and Benjamin Netanyahu sat in a secure meeting room with his security cabinet, screens flickering with live feeds of ongoing military operations. At 75, the seasoned prime minister had navigated the volatile currents of Middle Eastern politics for decades. An aide slipped into the room, whispering urgently. Netanyahu's brow furrowed as he glanced at his phone, notifications alerting him to the African president's live statement. His face remained stoic, but a flicker in his eyes betrayed that Traoré's words, from a nation many dismissed as peripheral, had struck a chord. "Is this Traoré?" Netanyahu asked, his gaze fixed on a screen broadcasting the press conference. "President of Burkina Faso, sir," his advisor, Eli Cohen, replied, scrolling through a tablet. Ibrahim Traoré, 37, rose to power via a military coup a few years ago, but has since gained significant public support. He's known for his Pan-Africanist and anti-imperialist rhetoric. Netanyahu adjusted his glasses, studying Traoré's poised delivery. The young president continued, his voice unwavering. "I urge the nations of the global south, our brothers in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, to shatter the silence of complicity. We cannot stand idly by while brute force is cloaked as legitimate defense. Turn it off, Netanyahu ordered sharply, but the words lingered. Traore's message was already spreading, igniting social media with hashtags like "Peace is not forged this way," gaining traction worldwide. Back in Ouagadougou, Traore concluded his address. Burkina Faso may be small in land, but we are vast in dignity. We will not cower from speaking truth, no matter the cost. History will judge those who chose silence when humanity demanded courage. As the camera stopped rolling, he stood still, absorbing the moment. His phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from diplomats and leaders, signaling the seismic shift his words had triggered. That Friday afternoon, under the blistering Sahel sun, Traore strolled through the palace gardens, contemplating the repercussions of his speech. He knew he had crossed a threshold, one that would redefine his presidency and, perhaps, global diplomacy. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu faced a stormy cabinet meeting. "This African doesn't know who he's challenging," one minister muttered, but Netanyahu, ever the strategist, recognized that dismissing the moral authority of rising leaders like Traore could prove costly. By early afternoon, Traore's words had sparked reactions across the globe. In Accra, Ghana, President Kwame Nkrumah called an urgent meeting with his advisors. Traore voiced what many of us feel but lack the courage to say, he remarked privately. At the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopian diplomats scrambled to gauge the statement's impact. Some viewed Traore as reckless, risking Africa's delicate ties with global powers. Others hailed him as the continent's bold new voice. In Brasilia, President Maria Silva watched the news with keen interest. "This young man has guts," she told her team. "He's articulating the global South's frustrations with unilateral military actions." Her words echoed Brazil's foreign policy stance against such interventions. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu endured a tense afternoon. Calls from Washington poured in, with U.S. diplomats fretting over the African statement's sway on global opinion. "We can't let a leader from a minor economy shape the narrative," one advisor argued, but Netanyahu, seasoned by countless crises, knew Traore's power stemmed not from wealth or arms, but from moral clarity. "He speaks from a place we lost long ago," he confided to his chief of staff. In Ouagadougou, Traore received calls of solidarity from African leaders. Senegal's President Amadou Ba was among the first. "Brother Traore, you said what needed saying. Senegal stands with you," he declared. As the day wore on, it became clear that Traore's speech had cleaved the international stage. The global North expressed unease at his interference, while the global South saw a chance to challenge decades of muted acquiescence. The following morning, Traore began his Saturday with a walk through Ouagadougou's vibrant neighborhoods, a ritual connecting him to his people. Crowds greeted him with cheers. "President, you spoke for us all," a market vendor exclaimed. "I only spoke the truth," Traore replied, pausing to shake her hand. "Truth belongs to no nation. It is humanity's legacy." During his walk, his phone rang. It was South Africa's President Thabo Mbeki. "Traore, your words are stirring debate here in Pretoria." Some are cautious, others elated. "Did you anticipate this?" he asked. "When you speak truth, consequences follow," Traore replied, watching children play and vendors set up stalls. "The question is whether we are ready to bear the cost of our convictions." As Traore spoke, the simple, dignified life of his people unfolded around him. The very life he had chosen to defend, knowing his words would ripple across oceans and unsettle the powerful. The world was listening, and the stage was set for a diplomatic reckoning. The sun rose over Ouagadougou on a quiet Sunday morning, casting golden rays across the presidential palace. Ibrahim Traoré sat in his office, surrounded by stacks of diplomatic cables and reports. His speech, delivered just 2 days ago, had ignited a global firestorm, and the world was watching Burkina Faso with unprecedented attention. At 37, Traoré felt the weight of history pressing against his shoulders, but his resolve remained unshaken. He sipped a cup of strong coffee, his eyes scanning a message from Mali's president, Colonel Moussa Keita, who had pledged unwavering support. Brother Traore, the note read, "Your courage has awakened Africa's spirit. Mali stands ready to walk this path with you." Outside, the streets of Ouagadougou hummed with life. News of Traore's statement had spread through markets and mosques, inspiring pride among citizens who saw their young leader as a champion of truth. Yet, Traore knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. His phone buzzed with a call from his foreign minister, Aissata Diallo. "Mr. President," she said, her voice steady but urgent, "Turkey's President Ahmet Yilmaz has just issued a public statement endorsing your words. He called you a beacon of courage in a world of cowards." Iran and Venezuela are echoing similar praise. This is gaining momentum we didn't anticipate. Traore leaned back in his chair, processing the news. "And the global north?" he asked. Grumbling, as expected, Aissata replied. "Washington and London are calling it unhelpful rhetoric. But, sir, there's something else. 3 Israeli firms with contracts in Burkina Faso have hinted at pulling out. Economic pressure may be coming. Let them try," Traore said firmly. "Our dignity is not for sale. Prepare a briefing for tomorrow. We need to strategize our next steps." As he hung up, he gazed out the window, watching a group of children kick a soccer ball in the palace courtyard. Their laughter reminded him why he had spoken out, for a world where such simple joys could thrive without the shadow of war. Across the globe, in Tel Aviv, Benjamin Netanyahu began his Sunday with a tense breakfast meeting at his official residence. At 75, the prime minister's face bore the lines of countless battles, both political and military. The Israeli press was ablaze with headlines about the African provocation, and international media debated whether Traore's speech marked a turning point for global South diplomacy. Netanyahu's communications advisor, Miriam Levy, set a tablet before him, displaying a trending hashtag, "Traore is right." "Prime Minister," she said cautiously, "this is gaining traction in Europe, and even the U.S. university students are organizing rallies. We need to address this." Netanyahu chewed his toast slowly, staring out at Jerusalem's waking streets. "We respond, and we hand Traore a bigger platform," he said, his voice low. "Silence is our best weapon for now." But his foreign minister, Gideon Saar, disagreed. "Sir, silence is being read as weakness. Iran's praising him, Turkey's backing him. If we don't act, this could spiral into a broader coalition against us." Netanyahu's eyes narrowed. "What does Washington say?" "They're uneasy," Gideon replied. "The White House called twice yesterday, urging us to manage the narrative. They're worried about public opinion shifting, especially among younger voters." Netanyahu waved a hand dismissively. Let Traore have his moment. He's a flash in the pan. Yet privately, he felt a nagging unease. Traore's words, untainted by geopolitical agendas, carried a moral clarity that was proving dangerously persuasive. Back in Ouagadougou, Traore spent his Sunday meeting with advisors and fielding calls from African leaders. Nigeria's President Bola Adeyemi reached out, his tone warm but cautious. "Traore, you've stirred the pot," he said. "Half of Lagos is cheering you. The other half fears economic fallout. Are you ready for what comes next?" "I spoke for our people, Bola," Traore replied. "If the truth brings consequences, we'll face them together." As he spoke, his communications advisor, Kofi, entered with a new report. "Sir, China's ambassador has requested an urgent meeting. They're hinting at expanded cooperation, trade, infrastructure, even diplomatic support." Traore's eyebrows rose. "Beijing moves fast," he murmured. "Schedule it for tomorrow. Let's hear what they propose." The Chinese interest was a sign that his stance could open new doors, but Traore remained wary. He wanted partnerships, not dependencies. By Monday morning, the diplomatic ripples of Traore's speech had become waves. In Ankara, Turkey's President Yilmaz doubled down, announcing plans to invite Traore to a summit on Middle East peace. In Caracas, Venezuela's President Juan Morales hailed Traore as a true anti-imperialist hero. Even China, typically reserved on such matters, issued a statement praising calls for dialogue over destruction. These endorsements transformed Traoré's speech from a bold statement into the foundation of an emerging global movement. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu faced mounting pressure. During a cabinet meeting, his defense minister, Yair Cohen, slammed a fist on the table. "This Traoré is turning us into a punching bag," he exclaimed. "We need to hit back, cut aid to African nations, freeze their assets, something." Netanyahu shook his head. "And make him a martyr? No, we play this smart. Call our ambassadors in Africa. Remind them of our investments, our tech partnerships. Let's see how many stand with him when their economies are at stake." Behind his calm facade, Netanyahu knew the game was shifting. Traoré's lack of economic leverage made him unpredictable, a wild card in a world accustomed to power plays. In Ouagadougou, Traoré began his Monday with a briefing from his economic minister, Fatoumata Sow. "Sir," she said gravely, "the Israeli companies have officially suspended their projects. The World Bank is also reviewing our funding programs. We're feeling the squeeze." Traoré's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Fatoumata, if our principles come with a cost, we pay it. Reach out to China, India, Brazil. There are partners who respect our sovereignty." As she nodded, a knock at the door announced the Chinese ambassador, Li Wei. The diplomat bowed slightly, his smile measured. "President Traoré, my government admires your principled stand. We propose a new trade agreement, agriculture, infrastructure, and technology. No strings attached." Traoré studied the ambassador, weighing his words. "We welcome cooperation, Mr. Li, but Burkina Faso bows to no one. Let's discuss terms that honor both our peoples." The meeting lasted hours, laying the groundwork for a partnership that could offset Western pressures. That afternoon, Traoré walked through Ouagadougou's markets, greeted by cheers and handshakes. A young student approached, her eyes bright. "President, you've made Africa proud," she said. "The world is listening to us now." "Your voice was always there," Traoré replied, smiling. "I just turned up the volume." As he spoke, his phone buzzed with news of protests in London, Paris, and New York, where activists rallied behind his words. In front of the UN headquarters, a small crowd read his speech aloud, declaring it the conscience of the global South. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu watched these developments with growing frustration. During a late-night meeting, his communications advisor, Miriam, presented a troubling report. "Prime Minister, Traoré's speech is being taught in American universities. Professors are calling him a moral visionary. We're losing the narrative." Netanyahu rubbed his temples. "How does a man from a country most can't find on a map wield this much influence?" he asked, half to himself. "Because he's not playing politics," Miriam replied quietly. "He's speaking from conviction, and people are starved for that." The next day, Tuesday, brought more surprises. In Ouagadougou, Mali's President Keita arrived for an emergency meeting. "Traoré," he said, clasping his hand, "you've opened a door we were too afraid to touch. Mali is with you, but we must be ready for the backlash." "Courage isn't fearlessness," Traoré replied, his voice warm but firm. "It's acting despite fear. Our people deserve leaders who don't flinch." The two men spent hours strategizing, envisioning a united African front at the upcoming African Union Summit. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu received a call from the U.S. President, David Harris. "Ben, this Traoré situation is snowballing," Harris said, his tone clipped. "It's stirring up domestic debates here. Maybe a diplomatic gesture, something to cool things down." Netanyahu sighed. "David, any move we make legitimizes him. Let the storm blow over." But after the call, he convened his cabinet. "Gentlemen, silence isn't working. We need a new approach, but it can't look like we're bowing to this African upstart." As the week unfolded, Traoré prepared for his next move. Late Tuesday night, he worked in his office, drafting a speech for the African Union. He knew his words had created a rare opportunity for Africa to assert itself globally. "It's time to propose solutions," he told Kofi. "Criticism alone isn't enough. We need a vision for peace. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu spent the same night revising potential responses, searching for a way to reclaim the narrative without elevating Traore further. The world held its breath, unaware that the coming days would bring a diplomatic showdown unlike any before. Wednesday morning in Ouagadougou dawned with a quiet intensity, the city's vibrant pulse mingling with the weight of global anticipation. Ibrahim Traoré sat at his desk, surrounded by advisors who pored over drafts of his upcoming African Union speech. At 37, he had become a lightning rod for the hopes and frustrations of the global South. His words from the previous Friday, now a rallying cry echoing across continents. His phone buzzed with messages of support from leaders in India, Brazil, and South Africa, but also warnings from allies about mounting economic pressures. Traoré's eyes, steady and resolute, reflected a man who knew he had crossed a point of no return. "Mr. President," said his communications advisor, Kofi Mensah, "the press is clamoring for your next move. Protests in London and New York are growing, and the hashtag Traoré is right is trending globally. But Israel's allies are pushing back. There's talk of sanctions." Traoré nodded, his gaze drifting to the window where the Sahel sun bathed Ouagadougou's streets in golden light. "Let them push," he said calmly. "Truth doesn't bend to threats. Call a press conference for tomorrow. It's time to move from words to action." Across the world in Tel Aviv, Benjamin Netanyahu faced a restless morning. At 75, the prime minister was no stranger to diplomatic storms, but this one felt different. Traoré's speech had sparked an unprecedented wave of global support, and Israeli newspapers buzzed with debates about the African challenge. During a tense cabinet meeting, his foreign minister, Gideon Saar, presented a troubling update. "Prime Minister, Brazil has just endorsed Traoré's call for a global South peace initiative. India and South Africa are leaning that way too. We're losing ground." Netanyahu's jaw tightened. "This is no longer just about Traoré," he said, his voice low. "It's about the narrative. If we respond directly, we elevate him. If we stay silent, we let his story dominate." His communications advisor, Miriam Levy, hesitated before speaking. "Sir, a young analyst in our team suggested something radical. What if we engage indirectly? A statement about peace, no mention of Traoré, but showing we're open to dialogue." Netanyahu leaned back, considering. "Draft it," he said finally, "but it must be flawless. No hint of weakness." As his team scrambled, he stared out at Jerusalem's ancient skyline, wondering how a leader from a small African nation had managed to unsettle decades of carefully crafted diplomacy. In Ouagadougou, Traoré spent Wednesday afternoon walking through the city's bustling markets, a habit that grounded him amid the chaos. Merchants and students greeted him with warmth, their pride palpable. A young teacher approached, her voice trembling with emotion. "President, your words have given us hope," she said. "Africa's voice is finally being heard." "It was always there," Traoré replied, his smile warm. "I just held up a mirror." As he returned to the palace, his economic minister, Fatimata Sow, brought urgent news. "Sir, 2 more Israeli companies have pulled out, and the World Bank is delaying our funding. But China and India have proposed new trade deals. They see you as a leader they can trust." Traoré's eyes gleamed with determination. "Good. Let's negotiate partnerships that respect our sovereignty. No compromises." That evening, he met with a delegation from Ethiopia, led by Prime Minister Dawood. "Traoré," Dawood said, clasping his hand, "your speech has galvanized the African Union. We're ready to back your vision, but we must tread carefully. The West is watching." "Careful doesn't mean silent," Traoré replied. "Our people deserve a future free from fear. Let's propose a united front at the AU summit." By Thursday, the global stage was electric with tension. In Ankara, Turkey's President Ahmet Yilmaz announced a formal invitation for Traoré to attend a peace summit, amplifying the young leader's influence. In Caracas, Venezuela's President Juan Morales organized a rally in support of Traoré's courage. Even in Beijing, typically reserved, a foreign ministry spokesperson praised Burkina Faso's principled stand for peace. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu faced a critical moment. During a late-night call with U.S. President David Harris, the American leader pressed him. "Ben, this is spiraling," Harris said, his tone urgent. "Traore's gaining allies. You need a response, something to show you're not dodging the issue." Netanyahu sighed heavily. "David, a direct response plays into his hands. But I hear you. We'll act tomorrow." After the call, he gathered his closest advisors. "No more silence," he declared. "Prepare a statement. We'll talk peace, but on our terms." In Ouagadougou, Traore finalized his press conference plans. Late Thursday night, he sat alone in his office, refining his speech. "Criticism was the spark," he told Kofi, who lingered nearby. "Now we build the fire, a movement for peace led by the global South." His words were no longer just a protest. They were a blueprint for change. Friday morning arrived, exactly 1 week since Traore's first historic speech. The press room in Ouagadougou's presidential palace buzzed with anticipation, packed with journalists from across the globe. At 11 a.m., Traore stepped to the podium, his presence commanding silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady yet infused with hope. "Last week, I spoke of how peace is not forged through violence. Today, I speak of how it can be built." He paused, letting the words resonate. "I propose a Global South Forum for Peace, headquartered in Ouagadougou. A platform where nations of Africa, Asia, and Latin America can mediate conflicts with ethics, not interests. We have no armies or wealth to rival the great powers, but we have something rarer, the courage to listen, to mediate without dominating." The room erupted in murmurs, cameras flashing. Traore continued, his voice rising with conviction. "We invite the world to join us, not to dictate, but to dialogue. Burkina Faso offers its heart and its home for peace." At the same moment, in Tel Aviv, Netanyahu held an impromptu press conference, his first public response in a week. "Israel has always sought peace," he declared, his tone measured but firm. "We welcome any leader from any corner of the world who genuinely seeks to contribute to stability." Though he avoided Traore's name, the message was clear, an acknowledgement of the African voice, however indirect. The world watched, breathless, as the two leaders' words collided. In the days that followed, Traore's proposal gained traction. Brazil announced formal support for the Global South Forum for Peace, followed by South Africa, India, and several Arab nations. Even China expressed interest, offering technical support. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu's team monitored the developments, noting that Israel sent discreet observers to preliminary talks, a sign of cautious engagement. 6 months later, Ouagadougou hosted the forum's first meeting. Representatives from 47 nations gathered under the Sahel sun, their discussions marked by a spirit of equality and hope. Traore, standing before them, spoke with quiet pride. "We are here not to rival the powerful, but to remind them that peace begins with listening." In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu reflected on the shift. Traore's voice, born in a modest palace in Ouagadougou, had forced a reckoning. The prime minister had learned that moral authority, wielded by an unexpected leader, could reshape the global stage. The phrase "peace is not forged this way" became a universal anthem, a reminder that truth, spoken boldly, could echo louder than bombs. Diplomats now spoke of the Traore moment, a turning point where the global South's voice began to rival the might of traditional powers. Traore, at 37, had not only altered his nation's path, but planted seeds for a new era of diplomacy, one where courage and conviction could challenge the old order, proving that the most powerful truths often come from the most unassuming places.